Welcome to Book Lounge by Libby. My name is Joe, and I'm so happy you're here. Today is the second part of our week on historical fiction. If you missed it, make sure you go and check out my conversation from Monday with Christina Baker Klein, Heather Webb, and Lauren Tarshish to see their perspectives on the genre, how they write it, and what exciting things they have next. But today, joining me to give you some historical fiction reading recommendations is the incredible host of the Book Gang podcast, Amy Allen Clark. Amy, welcome back.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I feel so lucky to get to have a couple of episodes with you.
Amy, I always want you around. I think that should be no surprise to our listeners at this point. But it's so easy to talk to you, and we just get to be up to nonsense.
Yes, shenanigans are going to happen today.
Shenanigans, if Shenan once, she'll Shenan again. I just when I think historical fiction, I know you've always got incredible recs for it. So there was no better person I could turn to for this episode than you, because my list is going to tell on me a little bit. But before we get into all that, I did my research, and there are some articles linked in the show notes if anyone watching or listening is curious to where I pulled some of this from. And like a lot of genres we've looked into in season 1 and season 2, there's so much debate on what exactly is historical fiction. So the high level summary is that it's a genre where narratives are set in the past, blending imaginative storytelling with accurate historical settings, events, or figures. They're typically written 30 to 50 years after the events take place or from the present time. And the stories focus on what it was like to live through that period, often featuring fictional characters experiencing those real historical, social, or cultural contexts. So in Monday's conversation, Lauren talked about how she wanted to be able to branch out in the I Survived series. Oh my gosh, it was so incredible to talk to her about those. She's been at Scholastic for 36 years.
Oh my goodness.
Which is nuts. But she was doing articles forever, and then one day she just pitched what is now a phenomenon. But she didn't know how strictly she felt she had to confine herself in that kind of general, what do I get to write about? Because she has been focused on events of the past. So in an April 2022 Book Riot article, What Makes a Book Historical Fiction, Isabel Pop says that she tends to think that books that illuminate a specific moment in history count as historical fiction, even if that point in time is very recent. Think of something like if it was a story told from the perspective of people during 9/11. But we tend to fall very vibey more often than not when it comes to historical fiction. I think you and I both have some initial things in mind. So my list today, I tried to challenge that as I usually do because, well, Amy, you always bring the eldest daughter energy. I bring the baby energy.
We need them all. We need them all.
We need them all. But, so I went a little time capsule with some of my recs because I like to push the envelope. I think for me, some of my favorite books that, we all know I love horror here, but that I would call horror aren't necessarily classified that way. They're just real life horror. And same thing here. So yeah, I want a book set in the 90s and maybe something was going on. So, again, there's a lot of debate on what's historical. Classic lit isn't necessarily considered historical fiction. Austen's not, but A Tale of Two Cities is because it deals with the French Revolution. Whatever. There's also so much debate on what the time frame is because the Historical Novel Society says 50 years or earlier. The Historical Writers Association says 35 years. The Walter Scott Prize for Historical Fiction says 60 years. And then the Langham Foundation says 1950 or earlier. So whatever.
I have an opinion. It's not a accurate one, but maybe people will appreciate it, especially my older readers.
Yeah, hit me with that.
So I have this woman in my reading group, and she's lovely. And she tells me she hates historical fiction. And I do assign historical fiction as part of our book club year. And so she'll talk about a book from the 60s or the 70s and be like, oh, I loved this book. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense because you don't like historical fiction. And she's like, if I grew up then, it is not historical fiction. So if you grew up in the 1920s, it's not historical fiction because it's just a coming of age tale, right? Why are we putting, labels on things? But also, I grew up in the 70s and 80s and 90s could potentially qualify as historical fiction, which is a very scary thought, right? I never thought I would be of the genre of which I read. So
Right.
it's just really fascinating to me. And I think, as far as historical fiction goes, because we try to pick a couple of books every year, in the beginning, I was definitely a World War II girl.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people were
That's where they
initially, that's kind
start
of the
from.
big
Yeah.
draw is
Yeah.
the World War II era books. But as I've branched out, it's like the whole world is your oyster. There's so many other stories to also embrace. And you have to be mindful if you're a book club leader, who is in my group, right? And those are things that I wasn't really thinking about. Like, one, who is telling the story? That's a very important element. And then secondly, if I have Jewish friends that are in my book club, does it help everyone to talk about the Holocaust? Sometimes maybe, sometimes not. If we have people of color do books of enslavement and trauma of people of color, does that help or hinder what we're trying to do? And so, that's not to say that those books are disqualified, but I do think to be a good, mindful book club leader, just be mindful of the people around you and what stories you're sharing. If you just have a white lady club, do those things, please. Like, we need you. We need your voices. But if you are
Right.
running a diverse group, I do think you need to be more mindful, especially like AIDS narratives, LGBTQ
Yes.
stories that are very traumatic. I'm learning a lot as a book club leader
You have to
personally.
you have
Yeah.
to be incredibly mindful of a lot of different things, but I talked with Christina Baker Klein earlier this week. You just talked to her for the same book, and as she was describing it, she was also like, "Oops, it started off great, and I thought, what an exciting story, and then, uh-oh, there is a whole slavery narrative, and how do basically people who were enslaved in a quite a different way." I don't love that description of, I mean, like, it's very different, but then also going to be the enslaver. And so it's very interesting to consider the perspectives, to
Mm.
consider what options we're getting. But what I like, especially in Christina's other books, like The Orphan Train, the opportunity to see moments in history that are often lost one way or another, because to go back to like World War II books, well, those sell. Like that there's nothing difficult about selling a World War II storyline, because so many people, that was their like special interest. So it's very easy to have those fly off the shelves. But that one-off book about one very specific thing can be difficult. Or I think of like, a lot of those stories, yes, a lot of them are coming from US authors when you're thinking of like World War II stories, but they have international appeal because everyone can reference their experience during that time, if they're of the age that that's why they're reading it, either they were children or they grew up during that time. But once you dive into things that are a little more regional, I'm thinking of like a lot of our brilliant Canadian historical fiction authors don't always get the same reach that some of our, like UK and US authors do in the genre.
Yeah, and also, it's not to say that World War II shouldn't be embraced, because
Sure.
I want to be careful that I also highlight that there are other books that have come out, particularly The Lilac People by Milo Todd is
Yes.
really
Incredible.
impactful about the trans community around that same time and era, and how it has, you know, so many overlaps to our current timeline that we are living in. But also the Book of Harlan by Bernice McFadden, which was this beautiful story that won the NAACP award. And I felt so thrilled to get to share space with her. I think she's such a special writer. There are new ways of telling those stories,
I think
just
that's
looking
it.
for
Yeah.
other diverse voices to also round out what you're learning about that time.
Absolutely. I think it's fair for us to say there are a lot of like cis white perspectives on World War II. It's time that we expand that that
Yeah,
reach out. Maybe just a little bit. And I would say that in all genres. So,
absolutely.
I'll put that one out there. I think for me, as always, I struggle when we limit by genre. I think genre limiting always makes me cringe and makes my like hackles raise, because I hate the term canonical. Like I hate like a canon or classic lit. Like those always make me angry, because to me, I think it inhibits progress. Like to your
Mm.
point just now of we're now finally seeing like we're holding space and seeing better representation and more perspectives of something that in most other cases would feel kind of like raked to death. So that's why I was like, yeah, I picked some books that were set in the 90s because I feel like this is our way to create new subgenres and keep everything from like being at a snail's pace to like new. I don't know. I think things are finally speeding up a little bit in publishing. I think like the gears of the machine move a little bit faster and are welcoming more creativity in the space. And so I don't like anything that so strongly limits that forward progress. I think maybe that's my initial bump against historical fiction. And I might share that same bump when it comes to something just being described as literature.
Sure, absolutely. And also, when it comes to books like this, historical romance can be a wonderful way also to learn about the world and have a nice happily ever after. And you can still have lots of diversity and interesting characters. And
Yes.
you have those kind of elements that speak to your heart in that way. But maybe right now the world feels heavy and you're not really ready to take on anything else. I know today I've been very mindful to not bring necessarily a war narrative. I think that there are so many other kinds of stories. So sometimes we get away from a genre because we just don't want it to overlap in any way with things we're currently going through or things that are making our hearts feel very tender. And so it's possible. And hopefully we'll have some good suggestions today.
And thank you for calling out uh, romance because that in all of my research was so contended of like, well, it depends on how they do it. I'm like, nope, I heard it. We're set in this is historical fiction. Bye.
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna kick it off with my first pick, which is a book I loved. And I know I've talked about on here, which I last year when it came out, and I interviewed Renee for it in 2024. But I I loved this book, and it's so good. And if you haven't, Barbie is Forever. This is Let's Call Her Barbie by Renee Rose, and this came out in January of 2025. If you're new here, I started collecting Barbies in the pandemic, and they bring me so much joy. I think anything we can do that gives us like happy expressions, whether it's the like, oh, I had an etch a sketch when I was a kid, and now I have one that I just when I need a moment at my desk, I can pick it up and like clear my brain by moving around some sand, whatever that is for you. I say embrace it. You don't necessarily have to have a whole room of Barbies, but but
But you
embrace the
could.
whimsy. But
You,
got,
you
I'm not
could.
gonna I'm not gonna stop anyone. Join me. Have an obscene collection. So this is a brilliant historical fiction narrative of the creation of Barbie. When Ruth Handler walks into the boardroom of the toy company she co-founded and pitches her idea for a doll unlike any other, she knows what she's setting in motion. It might just take the world a moment to catch up. In 1956, the only dolls on the market for little girls let them pretend to be mothers. Ruth's vision for a doll shaped like a grown woman and outfitted in an enviable wardrobe will let them dream they can be anything. As Ruth assembles her team of creative rebels, head engineer Jack Ryan, who hides his deepest secrets behind his genius, and designers Charlotte Johnson and Stevie Klein, whose hopes and dreams rest on the success of Barbie's fashion, she knows they're working against a ticking clock to get this wild idea off the ground. In the decades to come, through soaring heights and devastating personal lows, public scandals, and private tensions, each of them will have to decide how tightly to hold on to their creation. Because Barbie has never just been a doll, she's a legacy. It's such a fun story. And whether you are just generally curious, because I think no matter what your overall vibes of Barbie are, it's something that has existed culturally for us for so much time. And it is such like a loving and accurate portrayal. You know me, I don't read a ton of nonfiction, but I've read all the Barbie nonfiction out there. And it's like a perfectly cast portrayal of how it went down. So if you're even a little curious, it's an incredible book. Renee writes a lot of beautiful things. So I had to bring this one because it's just one of my faves.
Yeah, you should. I am dying to read this. I know we have talked about this book before and how much you loved it. And I have a local friend who has a Barbie room, and she does a Barbie tree and all of that stuff for the holidays. And I am endlessly fascinated by people who collect something like that. I think
Mhm.
that's so special. And I'm so glad that this book hit your sweet spot.
Oh, thank you, Amy. What's your first pick?
Okay,
Or
so
actually, before you do that, do you
yeah.
have anything you collect?
Do I collect anything? Hmm. Long pause. They're gonna be like, cut the fluff on this show. Do I collect anything? Um, no.
Mhm.
I don't like clutter, and I think that that is probably a weak spot for me. It doesn't make me necessarily an interesting person when it comes to collections of things. However, everyone would like for me to collect things, and my grandmother had some. I don't know, someone gave me a teapot and she decided I collected teapots and
Oh,
I didn't
no.
collect teapots, but then everyone was giving me teapots and suddenly I had teapots. So yeah, no, I like to be a little bit of a minimalist, I guess. But I love watching other people collect things. I do.
I'm gonna send you too many photos, Amy. You're
Okay.
you're gonna
Yeah.
have to
I'll love it
experience the
though.
nightmare.
We collect
It's
records, I guess.
Oh,
We
that's
for a
fair.
while we did that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was a very fun curation for a while. But have we actually sat down to listen to them? Shame on us.
That's what has stopped me from getting records because it'd be like, "Okay,
You
I
have to
did
get
it.
up
Look
and
at
turn
this
it around.
gorgeous" right? "Look at this gorgeous setup. Oh, it's so perfect. It's so aesthetic. Okay, well, I'm just gonna put my AirPods in and listen through my phone.
Yeah.
Bye."
Yeah, no. I
Oh,
wish. I wish.
I can also appreciate the minimalism, like the need for clean lines and lack of clutter.
There's still clutter, but yeah, I don't have anything cool that's cluttering my house.
And see, as you can see in my backdrop, I need things around me to let the creativity flow.
And
So
I need people like you in my life to remind me to collect responsibly. Yes.
yeah, well, I need you to remind me to collect responsibly. Anyway, your first book.
Yes. Okay. So I love this book and it is not coming out until July 14th. So I just want to say that ahead of time. It's called The Half Life by Rachel Beanland. This is her latest novel. So she does write several historical fiction. It is an oddly satisfying story with a combination of a steamy beach read and a densely historical fiction story that brings a little known chapter of the 1970s to life. So this is set in La Maddalena, and hopefully I'm saying this town right, but it is a major tourist destination once allowed by the US to moor a submarine tender there when the US and Italy had signed a secret accord during the Cold War. So Beanland draws from her father's experience as a supply officer stationed there, and it lends a lot of authenticity and some detail to that scene and setting. So the novel centers on Eileen, who is reeling from her brother Lenny's tragic death in the Vietnam War. Now, while her professors are dissecting literary tragedies, Eileen remains haunted by the real world loss of 30,000 young soldiers, a grief that overshadows her and brings her back home to her parents. There, she meets Paul, a naval officer who reveals that he is only weeks away from a 2-year deployment in Italy. And that is not where Eileen thought her life would ever lead her, especially after the loss of her brother. But Paul is magnetic. He's full of boyish charm. He's easy. Laughing with him is so fun. They have an intoxicating thrill together. And she basically gets drawn in. And so, even though she's only known him for a couple of weeks, they get married. And although she does not understand the classified nature of his work, the urgency of that romance sweeps them over to this Mediterranean setting. And there, Paul spends hours aboard a nuclear submarine shrouded in secrecy, while Eileen is basically left to carve out challenges of making dinner on this like temperamental hot plate in her room. She is searching for permanent apartments and striving to meet her husband's often unspoken expectations as her partner and as a newly minted military wife. But upon arriving there, Eileen is confronted by a tide of local resistance. There are banners and protests and warnings of nuclear waste that are echoing that anti war sentiment that she tried to leave behind. So, as Italian activists and scientists sound the alarm about possible contamination in that island's waters, investigations start to mount. Eileen finds herself caught in the crossfires, and she is discovering a confidant who threatens the precarious world that she's built. So she recounts this whole thing in over 161 short chapters. in a
Oh,
fashion that seems to break the fourth wall, but is actually it's to an undisclosed character whose discovery will come later in the story's conclusion. It's filled with a robust cast of Navy wives who step into those margins in her life. You will be off on many side plot dramas that mount to bring the story together. I poured over this 500-page story in about 2 days, and I appreciated that there were big, meaty topics that Beanland brought to life, including Eileen's sexual awakening, her discourse that she's trying to understand about her presence there. And perhaps most surprising of all about this book is the cost of American exceptionalism in an era where I did not contemplate that. So, Rachel will be joining Book Gang on August 7th. So, if you get the book and you want to hear her writing journey, that's another way to connect the dots. I'm so curious about her research on this little known history. It's just crazy. I never even knew we were based there for anything like that.
it sounds so interesting, and I'm fascinated. Like, I love that you picked something from the 70s because, right, like, yes, I get it that that's technically within like the 50-year window, but again, I still stand by whatever. It's history, so like we're set in a time. I liked the book riot point of it's in a time around a thing that will be historical fiction when time catches up. So it is a moment in time. But I will be very curious to listen to that to see what her research was like, because what do you do when you have to blend a lot of things to give people? Like, we do need,
Yeah.
there is like a duty to cover some of the actuality, but also still be able to be creative when there's so little research to work with, maybe.
Yeah. And I do say this is historically dense. Um, it is very steamy, but the parts that are historic seem incredibly researched. And for people who really like to languish in some of that, you are going to get that, even though it has these lighter elements. It's kind of like Judy Blume meets something like very historical. So I
Fun.
just loved this story so very much. It's just a perfect summer book. And I love short chapters in the summer where you can just pick it up and put it down
Any
and not
point, yeah.
feel tied to anything, even though, like I said, good luck. Good
You
luck.
didn't want to put it down.
No,
I
I didn't.
also I also love the style you described of like it's kind of fourth wall breaking. Like, no,
Mhm.
we're in the world, we're encapsulated, because I'm seeing that in like a few books lately, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
yeah, give me more of this. This is different. I'm okay
Mhm.
with different, please. Well, my next pick, we talked about last episode. We briefly mentioned it. It's Disco Witches of Fire Island by Blair Fell. Uh, yeah, this one came out in May last year, and this was beautiful. It was, like, heartbreaking and fantastical, and this is one of those where I'm happy to, like, skirt the line of historical fiction because, yeah, this is, probably, like, most akin to, like, a magical realism, I would say, but whatever. I'm gonna read you the description, and y'all can decide if you agree with me or not. Let me know in the comments if you're like, Joe, you brought me two historical fictions.
It's
What were you
your show,
doing?
Joe. Do whatever you want.
And
Do
I'm
whatever you want.
encouraging them to tell me what they think because honestly, I'm happy to hear it.
Yes.
Uh,
Discourse. The
discourse,
drama. Bring
please.
it.
Bring me the drama. Leave me some comments on Spotify. Put them in the YouTube comments. Whatever. I want to hear it. Nice things only, please. Kind
Be kind to
discourse.
my friend, okay?
But we're going to hit the dance floor with a coven of queer witches on 1980s Fire Island in this gay fantasy romance about finding magic, love, and family in the face of tragedy. A heartwarming LGBTQ plus novel for fans of steamy romance, Loathe at First Sight, and Red, White, and Royal Blue. So it's 1989, and Joe Agabian and his best friend Ronnie set out to spend their first summer working in the hedonistic gay paradise of Fire Island Pines. Joe is desperate to let loose and finally move beyond the heartbreak of having lost his boyfriend to the HIV/AIDS epidemic. The two friends are quickly taken in by a pair of quirky older house cleaners. But something seems off, and Joe starts to suspect that the two older men are up to something otherworldly. In truth, Howie and Lenny are members of a secret disco witch coven tasked with protecting the island and young men like Joe from the relentless tragedies ravaging their community. The only problem is, having lost too many of their fellow witches to the epidemic, the coven's protective powers have been seriously damaged. Unaware of all the mystical shenanigans going on, Joe starts to fall for the super cute bisexual ferryman who just happens to have webbed feet and an unusual ability to hold his breath underwater. But Joe's longing to find love is tripped up by his own troublesome past, as well as the lure of a mysterious hunk he keeps seeing around the island. A man Howie and Lenny warn might be a harbinger of impending doom. The disco witches need to find help, and fast, if they're going to save Joe and the island from the great darkness. But how? Fans of spicy queer romances with a dash of fantasy will fall in love with this stunning novel of community, love, sex, magic, and hope in desperate times. I think this description also gives it more of a fantasy feel than it even has. When you dive
Mm,
into it, you will for sure see why I would call this historical fiction outside of like just the timing, because like the goal of the magic is to kind of like joy and hope and love and like move forward. It's not like this isn't a magical narrative where we're stopping the epidemic from happening. Like this doesn't change history. This just kind of, puts us in a very specific moment of time. So something to give a lot of thought to. And I think if I had to like quick pop culture, like maybe movie describe it, I would say it's as magical as like practical magic is.
okay.
Like,
Yeah.
I think that's a
Just a
fair way
slight
to
bend. Yeah.
exactly. I think that's like a fair way to put it. That I guess by the end, practical magic's pretty magical, but that's honestly kind of how this goes. So overall, you're like, I'm just on Fire Island for the summer, so it's a
If
good time.
you don't follow Blair Fell on Instagram, he is a delight, and I think that he had a bunch of men in speedos pose with his book, but they don't speak English, and so he's like, "What did you think about this book?" And they're like, I
Can't
don't
read
speak
it. Yeah.
English," but they're posing with it. I don't know. You'll have to watch it. It's actually
Uh,
highly comical. He is just so kind and special, and I want to see loads of success for him for his
Absolutely.
writing career. It's just incredible.
Without a doubt. And for our audiobook lovers, friend of Libby, Daniel Henning, is the narrator for
Okay.
Disco Witches of Fire Island. I promise I found the book through it just coming down I remember like the pitches for it.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh darn, I get to listen to one of my favorite voices.
Oh, that's so great. I love that.
Yes.
Well, my next pick is Scandalous Women by Jill Paul. So, if you're not familiar with Jill, she actually has written 13 books, and it's including nonfiction and fiction, but they're all set, most of them, anyways, in historical timelines. So, she's done a nonfiction series on couples around the Titanic. She's done lots of different kinds of books like that, but she has more recently done books like this one that I'm highlighting. And after I finished it, I was like, this is the perfect book for anyone who likes literary hinges to their life. It's a dazzling deep dive into the electric 1960s when trailblazers like Jacqueline Suzanne, who's the author of Valley of the Dolls, and Jackie Collins crashed through the gates of literary establishment and redefined what women's stories could be. So back in the 60s, stories about women's pleasure or ambition were labeled trashy and they were dismissed even by feminists who should have known better. I feel like you could say the same is true today, but Suzanne's Valley of the Dolls burst onto shelves in 1966. It was raw and unfiltered. It spoke to a generation who were hungry for truth about desire. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Jackie Collins crashed through taboos with The World is Full of Married Men, proving that honest, racy storytelling could ignite a cultural firestorm. So Paul's genius is bringing the two Jackies together for one dazzling story. And while this overlap is a little bit imagined, it was not impossible because their orbits were often overlapping, whether that was on shows or book events that they were doing. She uses a very keen perspective of Nancy White, who is this fictional editorial assistant carving out her place in a man's world. And Paul immerses you in the high stakes world of publishing. And that includes all the catty closed door conversations and executives who are getting fat off profits, but refuse to admit that these books are real literature. And this character was very much inspired by Peggy in Mad Men for anyone who really, really loves scenes with her. So you get to watch Suzanne obsess over every draft. She establishes deep connections with booksellers. She is one of like kind of the founding mother of the book tour as a new kind of spectacle for readers, while standing at Colin's side as she dares the market to kind of keep up with their vision. Her drafting process was fascinating. She had 5 drafts, each on a different color of paper: white for bones, yellow for character, pink for story, blue to cut the fluff, a final crisp white for the masterpiece. It's those kinds of elements that showed readers like how relentless she was about her craft. But I think that the story, more importantly, illuminates her personal story, which is marked by a lot of heartbreak. Now, her son was diagnosed with autism. I think they called it Cantor's syndrome at the time. It was based on this doctor who basically said that mothers were to blame for their children, and they called it refrigerator mother syndrome. So she was labeled as a refrigerator mother, which meant that you were too cold to your children, and that's why they had autism. So she faced a lot of judgment, a lot of stigma, and she needed to succeed. She had to, because she had to pay for this long-term care for her child, who's now still alive and in their 70s. So these women, though, are not saints. And I think that's the fun of it. We've got drugs and drinking habits, late night parties, infamous TV clashes with people like Truman Capote. Paul does not shy away from the messiness of what made these legends. And I thought this audiobook was absolutely spectacular. So if you're looking for an audiobook experience, Lisa Flanagan is the audiobook narrator on this book, and she transports you straight into this era. It's just a very nice, light book. I learned so much. I feel like it's been such a hit with our readers. And we hosted Jill Paul on our show. So if you want to hear her talk about her writing journey and also what it means to be an author who's not a one-hit wonder, how do you keep sustaining that career? Really fascinating.
Oh, that sounds perfect. Like, this is where I go, maybe I am a historical
You
fiction
would be. I
reader.
think you would love this. I mean, it
Oh,
is so fun. And also just getting to like look through all of these old
yes.
photos and then watch the news clips of what she's talking about. And, you know, I think Jackie Collins, both of them passed away from cancer diagnosis. And she did have to be really, really careful about writing because they're very protective of these
Oh, the
entities.
estate,
Yeah,
absolutely.
so they had to be like screened and screened. And she did want to do a little bit more with Collins. I feel like this isn't as much her story, but to protect all people involved and just the care that she did with, especially the autism diagnosis, like that to me as a parent of an autistic child, you know, what mothers get blamed for. I mean, even now, what we are using as examples of why children have autism are just flabbergasting. And so this is really good for mothers that want to see like these were the women that kind of paved the way for us to finally get to the place where we are now as mothers with our autistic kids.
I cannot wait. I'm like, I'm moving this up the queue. Like,
You'll love
it,
it. It's so fun.
this just got top billing, and the thought as well of like, there have been so many conversations of like what is lit, what is worth reading, and like what is just trash. And I mean, like, I think the way that these books were described then, and then if we even think of like the 90s, the term chick lit,
Right.
and even a lot of
Book talk books. I mean,
book talk
right?
books, and then book talk gets the same shade,
Yeah.
absolutely. Oh, well, I heard of it on book talk, and we go, "Ugh." I'm charming today, that face. But also beach reads. I think beach reads get the same treatment if something is classified that way. So I did a whole episode in season 1 to just be like, this could be anything. You don't get to judge by calling it a beach read. Like, there's
Women's literature. Like why
exactly,
do we have this separate
exactly.
category? There are some
It's the
aspects
like
you're like,
clean it up.
okay, like
Sure.
where do we file this kind of thing? I understand that. Where do we find it? Where do we file it? But at the same time, yeah, there are lots of aspects, especially when we're talking about how these women and the same can be said today is that who's driving the profit, right? Big names like Emily Henry and Kennedy Ryan and lots of other romance writers tend to drive a lot of profit to these places and yet are not treated like literary fiction, right?
Correct.
So as
Correct.
as even though they're bringing in more. Yeah.
Right. They're treated as something other than like, "Oh, you're so successful in this space." No, you're just successful. Like,
Right.
what?
Exactly.
I mean, even like Sarah J. Maas and Rebecca Yarros, the
Yeah.
same thing of like, "Oh, well, that's for like the monster girly." Like, no, these are just successful books.
I know. I said to Jill Paul, "Do you think that these women would be on Book Talk if they were still around?" She was like, "Oh, they would so be on
I
Book
was gonna
Talk.
say,
They would
absolutely.
be." She's like, "They would
These
have
are messy
teams of people
queens.
working
Yeah.
on these." Yeah.
They would employ a whole suite of
Hmm.
people to
Yeah.
make
I
their
love this
content.
author. Highly recommend. She's so delightful.
Oh, I can't wait. Well, I'm continuing on my weird trend as usual. And I found this one, when it came out last year purely because of the cover, because like I saw it and I went, yeah, that's gonna be for me. It's The Hounding by Zena B. Purvis.
Oh,
This came out
yeah.
in August of last year. Yeah. And it was a national bestseller. Like I'm looking at the link in Libby, and it was New York Times Book Review Club book pick of the week, and a notable book, and an Indie Choice Awards finalist, and it was named the best book of the year by NPR, Time, and Kirkus. Like, there's all of that, but it's also billed as like The Crucible meets the Virgin Suicides in a haunting debut about five sisters in a small village in the 18th century England whose neighbors are convinced they're turning into dogs. So even before the rumors about the Mansfield girls begin, Little Nettlebed is a village steeped in the uncanny, from strange creatures that wash up on the riverbank to portentous ravens gathering on the roofs of people about to die. But when the villagers start to hear barking, and one claims to see the Mansfield sisters transform before his very eyes, the allegations spark fascination and fear like nothing has before. The truth is that though the inhabitants of Little Nettlebed have never much liked the Mansfield girls, a little odd, think some, a little high on themselves perhaps, they've always had plenty to say about them. As the rotating perspectives of five villagers quickly make clear, now is no exception. Even if local belief in witchcraft is waning, an aversion to difference is as widespread as ever. These conflicting narratives all point to the same ultimate conclusion. Something isn't right in Little Nettlebed, and the sisters will be the ones to pay for it. It's a richly atmospheric parable of the pleasures and perils of female defiance. The Hounding considers whether in any age it might be safer to be a dog than an unusual young girl. And in that, just something to think on right there.
That is. I want to read this. It has
You
been on
should.
my list forever. It's one that I quite familiar with because I keep adding it to book lists and things that I'm doing. And I'm like, yes, yes, I know everything about it, but I haven't read it. So I know exactly what you're talking about. I've heard the audiobook is pretty good.
It's incredible. And this was one that like it didn't make my cut last week when we were talking debuts, and I was like, oh darn, guess it's gonna go
Yeah, you're like,
on
guess
this
what? It's
week.
back.
Guess what? Still
Yeah.
counts. But
Perfect.
it's incredible, and we all know here I like weird books, and
Mhm.
this is weird in the best way. It's like I don't know, the movie The Witch, where you're kind of like for the majority of the movie, you're like, is something happening? So
Yeah.
I don't know. I think
Ooh,
it's
I
worth a
love
shot.
that. Those are
And
the kinds
again,
of horror movies that I love too.
exactly. And I tried to go the route of if you may be listening to this episode, rather as someone coming in new because you love historical fiction, and if that's you, hi, hello, thank you for being here. Consider sticking around. But for the listeners who may not necessarily gravitate towards historical fiction, I'm hoping that my picks might be some of the ones that are like, Joe just made it over the like
Yeah.
past this test for us, but we want to read it. So I'm hoping it's the magic blend.
I love this. Well, I actually read a backlist book more recently that
Ooh,
happens to fit under this criterion. So
yay.
I'm very excited to talk about the final revival of Opal and Nev by Donnie Walton.
Yes.
Did you read this?
So when I was pulling your links in this afternoon, I haven't read it yet, but I remember when it came out because I think it was on my monthly
Okay.
book picks list at the time because I
Well, I
I
mean,
remember the cover, I remember the
yeah.
title.
So this
Yeah.
book, again, it's like one of those books that I keep anytime I have a books about music show or we do something like that, I always like think about this book, but I had never read it. And this book was published in 2021, and this was her debut. And I think part of the reason why for some readers it didn't land is that everyone was so tightly holding on to this is the next Daisy Jones and the Six, right?
Yeah.
Which everyone was very obsessed with. And I don't think you should hold that comp very tight because this is its own wholly original story. And the reason I bring this up is it is one of the best audiobook experiences I've had. But I would recommend, which is what I did, I got my paper copy from the library because there are footnotes in the story. And sometimes for an audiobook experience, I do prefer to have that in front of me so I can follow where we're going in the narrative. I don't tend to do very well if there's footnotes with just an audiobook. But pair the two together and you are going to be off on such an incredible ride. So Opal Jewel is unapologetically herself and years ahead of her time. Admittedly, not a beauty, what she lacked in looks, she made up for in song, electric charisma, and a strong inner voice that guided her through the trickiest situations. When a British ginger musician, Neville Charles, spots her at an amateur night singing with her sister, it's the beginning of a partnership that will upend the music world. Together, they dive headlong into the magnetic chaos of Rivington Records, hungry to make their mark. New York in the early 70s is alive with possibility, and the group flourishes amid the city's wild creative currents. The partnership is purely platonic, which allows them to focus on finding their own rhythms together and apart. While Opal and Nev may disagree at times about the music that they pick, they find ways to come together. To show the contrast in styles, Nev loves slow, sad songs, and Opal thinks his picks are, quote, too musty, sad, and old school Negro. So Opal is not going to have any of the melancholy with her music. She says the 1970s were a whole other vibe for Black people. They were all singing James Brown, Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud. And that's what we were on, joy. So the partnership begins to evolve as they begin to understand each other's styles. You would think this dynamic between Opal and Nev is the strongest thread, but the supporting cast is far more intriguing to me. There's a character named Jimmy Curtis who learns to read music and then teaches other cats like Opal because it's his responsibility from one Black artist to another that helped him master his own rhythms. There's a hilarious dynamic that builds between Virgil LaFleur, a flamboyant man who once sold reefer and now operates as Opal's stylist, bringing levity to every scene. I think of them as Zendaya and La Roche. Every time I was like listening to them, they kind of fight like siblings, and you can prepare for lots of fun like that. But their luck changes when a rival band at their label waves a Confederate flag during a promotional show. Opal's outcry and the violence that follows sparks a reckoning that will reverberate throughout her life and the lives of those around her, offering readers a stark reminder that the cost of speaking out is highest for Black women. So years later, readers are thrown into a jarring 2016 when a music journalist who is still left with lingering questions about her father's death on that fateful day contacts the only living bandmate from the Bond brothers, seemingly modeled after Leonard Skinner, to garner more information. His new political leanings, quote unquote, are hanging on the flagpole to welcome guests in 2016. And the racism continues, but you'll love discovering how the group is reclaiming their story. So because the novel is presented as a journalist compiling interviews decades later, the audiobook sounds like a rock documentary or a podcast investigation. We have different voices recounting the same events, sometimes conflicting perspectives. And that structure is why it's best served on audio, but I did love that paper copy. And I would also say that the footnotes are all delivered in the same narrator voice. So that did help my brain a little bit to be like, okay, this goes here. This is why it's here. So instead of a single reader, we are given this huge cast. Bonnie Turpin's one of the voices on there, a lot of familiar voices that you will appreciate. And also it was just so fun. I forget how fun audiobooks can be. This was such a unique experience. I did reach out to Donnie and tell her how much I loved it. And it's celebrating its 5-year anniversary. So it was like, if you want to come back. And she was like, thanks so much. But I don't think she's coming to my show. But I was like, that's fine. I'm going to bring it to Libby because I loved it so much and I want to promote her. I just think it's such a great first novel.
I've heard so many good things about it, and I think you're right. The comp of Daisy Jones murdered it because
Yeah. And
it's
why
so
do
unique.
it's just like Gone Girl. Like, I just don't think that we need to keep saying that because it never we basically expect certain kind of expectation with that experience. If
Yes.
I was thinking about it, I don't think that it's the same. It's just this oral history element. And yes, there is a band, but to hold that comp, it sets expectations. And then people are saying, well, I didn't like it because
Yeah.
it wasn't that. Well, it's not.
Right. I think the only recent that I was like, oh yeah, this feels like Daisy Jones and the Six, was My Ex the Antichrist.
Okay, I have not read
which
this.
which like, wasn't really for me, but
Yeah.
I think there are times when comps can be helpful, and then I think there are times where it is dangerous. I think it's one thing to say for fans of to be like, if you like music history stories like Daisy Jones and the Six, maybe that's one. I don't know. I think the framing is very important, not
I mean, and people are still
like to
using
position
that
this as like
comp.
the
They keep
next.
using it. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think Ashley Winstead has a book out about bands right now, and they were using that comp. And then people are saying, well, I thought it was going to be like that. And it's like, but it's not. And so I just feel like we have to not hold up those comps or ask someone you really trust for a good comp instead of whatever is being
Yeah.
provided by the publishing house.
Yeah. I think honestly, I don't know. I wish there was a better way to comp books. Like, I don't know. That's something I'm like, publishing, if you're listening,
I always ask my
consider
author
options.
what
Yeah.
their pitches were, like for what did
Yeah.
you call the comp? And then I ask if I can give them a comp because I'm like, but I think I know the comp.
You're like,
But
actually,
actually, you
I
don't
know
know the comp.
better.
I actually
You
know
don't
your
know your
comp.
book like I know your book. Thank you. Thank you. Um, well, I'm gonna hurt my own feelings with this next
Uh-oh.
one, because this is a historical fiction set in 1994.
Oh, I'm not here for that.
I'm not either, but I recently learned that, if it's like 30 because some people say 30 years, and well,
Oh
the beginning of
man.
the 90s was more than 30 years ago. No one can look at my birth certificate.
Joe, I'm older than you.
No, you're not. I
Yes,
don't
I
believe
am.
it. I know, but like I'll never believe it.
Okay. I was
Every
in high school.
you were.
Yeah, I know.
See, to
Take care of
me,
your skin, wear your
ev-
sunblock, do everything you
everyone
can.
is the same age as me and the same height as me. Like I that's
I know it's same.
like I don't know. Uh, so I think I'm short and I think I'm very young
Yes,
or
you
very
are.
old. I don't
No,
know.
no, no.
But I'm also not short. It's the struggle. I'm like, oh yeah, clearly I'm 5'3", like all of my friends who are girls. Oh, you're almost 6'1". Got it. Well,
You're
anyway,
1 foot taller than me, so
and see, Amy, I would have told you, you and I are the same height.
we are the same
We're the
height.
same height because you have tall energy.
Yeah.
So my next pick is Dead 11 by Jimmy Giuliano. This came out in 2023. Uh, yeah, it's a horror thriller. And so, yes, this one doesn't really make the. I'll let everyone fight me on this one, but it's set in 1994. Okay, I found a historical horror because I thought, why not? Like, if you are like me and you're just like, "Ah, how do I dip my toes in? Go into the past a little bit. We're on a creepy island where everyone has a strange obsession with the year 1994. A newcomer arrives, hoping to learn the truth about her son's death, but finds herself pulled deeper and deeper into the bizarrely insular community and their complicated rules. Clifford Island. When Willowstone finds these words written on the floor of her deceased son's bedroom, she's perplexed. She's never heard of it before, but soon she learns it's a tiny island off of Wisconsin's Door County Peninsula, 200 miles from her home. Why would her son write this on his floor? Determined to find answers, Willow sets out for the island. After a few days on Clifford, Willow realizes this place is not normal. Everyone seems to be stuck in a particular day in 1994. They wear outdated clothing, avoid modern technology, And perhaps most mystifyingly, watch the O.J. Simpson car chase every evening. When she asks questions, people are evasive, but she learns one thing: close your curtains at night. High schooler Lily Becker has lived on Clifford her entire life, and she's sick of the island's twisted mythology and hearing to the rules. She's been to the mainland, and everyone is normal there, so why is Clifford so weird? Lily is determined to prove that the islanders' beliefs are a sham. But are they? 5 weeks after Willow arrives on the island, she disappears. Willow's brother Harper comes to Clifford searching for his sister. And when he learns the truth, that this island is far more sinister than anyone could have imagined, he is determined to blow the whole thing open if he can get out alive. So I really broke the rules because it's also not even in
I know, like,
1994.
what? Okay.
Look, it's good.
You're like, I'm just trying to work this book in here, okay?
I'm sneaking this one in. I think
It has a VHS cover, is that correct? Am I
it
thinking
does.
this?
It does.
Yeah,
You're thinking of
okay,
the right
yes.
one.
Uh-huh.
It's just the, like, if you need a palate cleanser, if you wanted something that's like weird and like set in one specific day in history, I think I get to break the rules with that one.
But you did say O.J. Simpson, which would technically qualify as like a
Correct.
historic event.
They're
The
stuck.
trials. I remember.
They're
I
stuck in
mean,
one
because
day in
I
1994.
was in high
So
school. We were on our lunch hour when they were making the verdict. I remember sitting
wow.
in our cars because we got to go out for lunch, for like 30
Oh,
minutes.
must be
And like,
nice.
it was very dangerous. Like, let's be
Well,
honest. Like,
sure, terrible idea, but
we were like, sure, we can go to the mall 30 miles away. Like, why not? Like, we'll be back in
we can get
time.
back in
Yeah.
2 minutes.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So,
I
yes, it is
mean,
historic. Yeah, for sure.
1994, I was 2 years old.
See? I know. I knew it.
Well, everyone forgive me that I gave you a cop out. My next one is actually set in the 90s.
Okay. All right. Well, I have a real historical fiction book
Thank
called
you.
The Foursome by Christina Baker Klein, which I just wanted to talk about because I know that she has been on the show, and I think it would be really wonderful to hear my opinion on what I thought about this story because it was incredible. Like, I loved this book so very much. I read it in a single day. And ever since I've read it, it really has occupied a lot of my mind thinking about this unusual, unique family. So, Chang and Ang were Siamese American conjoined twins who were connected at the chest by a band of cartilage. They're sold at the tender age of 8 by their mother. They toured internationally as a circus spectacle before deciding to settle in North Carolina, where they hope to find wives and grow a family. Now, Adelaide and Chang have insta love, right? They like see each other and like, we love each other. But the prospect of their marriage comes with a lot of complications. So the couple would be engaged in an interracial marriage at that time. Now, yes, more so between Black and white people, but this was still interracial. But there was also a greater risk of Addie being accused of bigamy if Aang did not have a partner of his own. So pressure mounts on Sarah, her sister, to step up and marry Aang, not only to protect her sister's reputation, but also because a pregnancy out of wedlock has already tainted, what small reputation she already had, so she can't get her own prospect. So basically, we're thrown into truly a very claustrophobic story of this foursome that takes readers through a lot of uncomfortable turns, which include their wedding night when the twins have to figure out, how they're going to engage with their wives in this room and how the sisters are going to do it when they also are not conjoined. So they don't necessarily have the same kind of mentality where they can go other places. And Klein does not shy away from the choreography of those moments, but she does pull us into some of the more intimate moments, more discomfort. And those operate on a small scale, like, maybe just being in the same room together, but also on a bigger scale where the sisters have differing opinions on things like religion and war and slavery. And basically unable to resolve their own differences. The sisters grow their families on separate properties where the twins fathered 21 children in total and grew their farm where they employ, quote, a few dozen slaves and side with the Confederates despite their own experiences essentially being enslaved as children and enduring exploitation. This book was inspired by the author's own family history and the intriguing question that she kept pondering, which is why would two conventional young women in rural North Carolina choose to marry conjoined brothers from Siam, now Thailand? She delivers an astoundingly well researched novel. It's page turning, it is eye opening, it is phenomenal, it's larger than life. I really enjoyed unboxing the entire book with her front to back. We did a little spoiler episode, and that airs on April 8th on our show. And I just can't say enough good things about this book. I have been a longtime reader of Christina's, and this one is my favorite of all of her books.
Oh, I love that. Is she stopping near you on tour?
No, no.
Well, I mean, if you want to come and visit Amy, she's stopping here.
Okay, okay. I might have to come make a road trip. I actually just really, truly enjoyed discussing, her career as someone who has been around since the 1990s. I mean, she was my gateway drug into historical fiction with The Orphan Train, which, she says is very lightly historical fiction. But at the time, we didn't know any different in what this category
Historical fiction
was.
wasn't
Yeah.
around like
She also
that.
has
Yeah.
a book called, I think it's A Piece of the World. And that is about Christina's World, the painting, about the woman that is captured there.
Yes.
It's about her disabilities and the things that she endured in her life. And I just really love her storytelling. But this book was really smartly plotted because it only tells the story from one sister's perspective. It was very smart to do so. Otherwise, I think it would have been all over the place. Four people, I mean, it already felt that way. Having
Right.
one sister, the other sister goes away. Now you're only getting that one viewpoint. And, honestly, she seemed like the favorable of the two sisters to me as someone I would want to spend time in their head. It's always unpleasant when you get in a book and you're like, gosh, this person is pretty awful. She's
Yeah.
she's the really awesome sister. So you get to see everything through her eyes, especially on big, political issues that are still happening now today.
Definitely. It's so compelling and yeah, definitely pick it up, friends. Well, my next pick will actually be set in the 90s this time. This is Silver Nitrate by Silvia Moreno Garcia. And,
hmm
you
I've read
know,
this one. It's so good.
it's so good. Again, I get it. Like forcing this one in, but it, it it's of a time period. Thank you very much. We are in Montserrat, which is our character who has always been overlooked. She's a talented sound editor, but she's left out of the boys club running the film industry in 90s Mexico City. And she's all but invisible to her best friend, Tristan, a charming, if faded, soap opera star, though she's been in love with him since childhood. Then Tristan discovers his new neighbor is the cult horror director, Abel Ureta. And the legendary auteur claims he can change their lives, even if his tale of a Nazi occultist imbuing magic into highly volatile silver nitrate stock sounds like sheer fantasy. What a sentence. The magic film was never finished, which is why Reta swears his career vanished overnight. He is cursed. Now the director wants Montserrat and Tristan to help him shoot the missing scene and lift the curse. But Montserrat soon notices a dark presence following her, and Tristan begins seeing the ghost of his ex-girlfriend. As they work together to unravel the mystery of the film and the obscure occultist who once roamed their city, they may find that sorcerers and magic are not only the stuff of movies. I think Sylvia's writing often has some of that historical fiction energy to it. Like,
hmm
if we were to translate it from horror to like the typical what you'd think historical fiction version of this book, where it is just the story of this stolen artifact or mystery lost to history film, I think the tone doesn't change very much. The elements of horror, of course, amplify certain things and diminish others. But I think this stands as like a good like historical picture book, even though
Yeah,
it's only the 90s.
I know. It does feel like it's like almost a period piece. I think it's because of the cover as well and like the way it was marketed.
Mhm.
I will say I got the paper copy and the audiobook. I think that's the way to go for full immersion, so you can follow all the language, all the names. It has a great author's note at the end. And they don't always read the author's note, which is always frustrating. With this book in particular, I remember coming and telling my husband about like all of these fun facts that I learned. It is a slow burn book.
Yes.
So this is definitely for readers who don't mind like a slow burn story, and it feels very noir, like very, very beautiful.
Absolutely. So I think for like what I said earlier of a lot of times historical fiction is just a vibe. I think this counts
Yeah,
for the vibe alone.
I agree. I
Thank
agree.
you. Like I said, I 3 out of 5 ain't bad.
Yeah, I see you trying, Joe. I do.
I'm
I will make a
trying.
historical fiction reader out of you. I may send you a little list of things that I think would,
And I would love that.
yeah,
I love to be recommended books. And this is where I'm like, I have to turn into Amy, who is
yeah.
so much so much more informed and knowledgeable
No,
about
it's
this
only because I have to
space.
pick for our book club and we do like the genre sampler. So I'm always like, okay, like where are we at here? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my last pick is Happy Land by Dolan Perkins Valdez. I love this author so very much. And as I mentioned before, I try to not have like a lot of trauma around Black people in my historical fiction book club. This is a great book for book club leaders. It's inspired by the real kingdom of the Happy Land. It was a self governed community of formerly enslaved people who founded this in the aftermath of the Civil War. And this novel asks a very deceptively simple question. What does it mean to truly own something in a country that has repeatedly denied that right? And then it answers it across generations. So at the center of it is Nikki. She's a modern day real estate agent who feels unmoored professionally, personally, spiritually when she's called back to the mountains of North Carolina by her estranged grandmother. She expects answers about her fractured family, but instead, she's given a story of Luella, her ancestor, who rose from enslavement to become a queen in a hidden Black kingdom built on land, labor, and radical self determination. So the real Happy Land existed, thriving for decades as a self sustaining Black community of hundreds. But like so many Black histories, it was left fragmented, it was misrecorded, it was nearly lost altogether. And so the novel becomes that act of reclamation, not just of the land, but of the narrative. This is voiced with two gorgeous narrators, Bonnie Turpin again, for the win. I love her. And it elevates this in such a beautiful way. It's very immersive. And after I spent the day with Dolan recording last summer for this book, I was really struck by her excavation process. She even uncovered historical inaccuracies that they were able to add into different aspects of their archives and things that she did. She really intrigues me because I asked her, like, what do you think will write next? And she says, like, she writes every single book like it will be her last. She's always thinking that this is the last book. I will never get another book.
Wow.
Whether that's like, she's
That's
contemplating
fascinating.
life, or it's, I won't get another deal, or
Right.
all of those feelings. And so she always is writing like, she's not going to have
Like
any
there's
time
no
left. Like
tomorrow.
this is going to
Yeah.
be the final one. And so I can see her diligence and her craftsmanship as she approaches things, and it's just a joy to highlight this. It's a perfect book club book, honestly, for especially if you want something where I feel like it's a little bit lighter in nature, but you still are learning so much. Who knew that there was a kingdom, that existed here in the States? Like crazy.
I love that. I love getting to learn new things. I love when it's snuck in on me. That is what I love about historical fiction is that I'm always getting something out of it. And that's what always keeps me coming back and trying and finding like where's my because I think we can find our own niche in every genre if we really want to. And I know it's there for me somewhere.
It is. It is.
If you'll indulge me, have like a quick shout out list of graphic novels.
Yes.
So I do this twofold. If you love graphic novels and you want to try historical fiction, Or if you love historical fiction and you'd like to try graphic novels, these are in either way going to meet you where you're already at. The first is Flung Out of Space by Grace Ellis. This is a fictional and complex portrait of bestselling author Patricia Highsmith, caught up in the longing that would inspire her queer classic, The Price of Salt. It's incredible. Flung Out of Space is both a love letter to the essential lesbian novel, The Price of Salt, and an examination of its notorious author. So, very cool if you like books about books as well. Then there's Stage Dreams by Melanie Gilman. This is, ooh, how do I want to say this? I'm just going to borrow a little bit from the description. It brings together two unlikely partners, a Latinx outlaw and a trans runaway, for a frolicking queer Western adventure full of robbery and romance. So if you like a Western, I would count Westerns in historical fiction, at least in my world. Uh, and then we have The Legend of Auntie Po by Xing Yun Kaur. This was beautiful. It's part historical fiction, part fable, and 100% adventure. We follow 13-year-old May reimagining the myths of Paul Bunyan as starring a Chinese heroine while she works in Sierra Nevada logging camp in 1885. Very cool. It's a very interesting perspective in time and history as well, especially kind of following the passage of the Chinese Exclusion Act. There's a lot of tumult happening. So, again, another good way, and gorgeous illustrations. And then last, who would I be if not recommending something gay? This is Parallel by Matthias Lehmann. It's Carl Kling's story. It's one of Revelations. And these he has addressed in a letter to his daughter Hella, who had disowned Carl many years ago. It's a scream from the heart from a father to a daughter he never really got to know. And he comes clean to her about his failed marriages, his fractured family relations, and his love for men. It takes place between the end of World War II and the 1980s, and it chronicles Carl's efforts to comply with social norms in order to keep his sexuality a secret. So just a quick graphic novel roundup. Surprise, surprise, all of those hit the theme.
You nailed it. You nailed this assignment. I'm very proud of you.
Well, I'll take a B+. It's fine. I get it.
Hey, you could be an A student next year when we do this again.
Oh, and that's spoken like the eldest daughter. Well, listeners, remember, everything is in the show notes. You can find all of these books linked to Libby, as well as where you can find more from Amy. Amy, thank you so much for being here and sharing with us today.
Of course. I don't want to be anywhere else.
Oh, I love to hear that, because I wouldn't want anyone else here with me for this today. Now, make sure you're subscribed and following the show wherever you listen or watch your podcasts. You won't want to miss next week. We're going to dive into cover design. I get to chat with 4 incredible cover designers on Monday. And then on Thursday, we'll be telling you some recent books we only read because of the cover. Thanks so much for joining us today, and happy reading! You can sample and borrow the books from today's episode in the Libby app, or if you're a librarian, find them for purchase in Overdrive Marketplace. Book Lounge by Libby is a proud Evergreen Podcast signature program. Explore more amazing shows at evergreenpodcasts.com. This podcast is produced and recorded by me, Joe Skelly, with editing by Andrew Alonzo. Our theme music is High Five by Rex Banner, used with permission. Book Lounge by Libby is presented by the Libby app. Learn more at libbylife.com/booklounge.